I feel like a lot of times when there are negative Asian characters, or perceived negative Asian characters, that the go-to for Hollywood at least is to like, well, let's just not make them Asian. I feel like that isn't the answer, right? Because like the answer to like negative stereotypes isn't erasure, right? We're not saying let's just have less Asian people. Let's find a way to make that character less problematic.
I would say in the case of our case and other forms of issues of prejudice and racism is that it's solving racism through the lens of whiteness, and how white culture ultimately the solution is erasure. It's let's substitute this problematic thing that we don't understand to begin with
by making it
with whiteness.
Yeah. But that's why white people can be anything, right? Like white people can be, villainous and heroic, or whatever traits you need. You can make the character white.
Or
he can
other
embody
races.
Or other races. In the case of like
Emma Stone.
Emma Stone, exactly. Hashtag Emma Stone. So I think that that's exactly right in terms of like the idea of like whiteness being neutral.
Mm-hmm.
But what the misunderstanding is whiteness is not neutral.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is the reason why kids in school study white history, white culture, white language. They read white books, but in school we don't call it that. We call it English.
Yeah,
we call
exactly.
it history. But that is what they've come to know of in America. Like, this is what history is. It's just all seen through this lens of whiteness and how white people navigate our laws, how white people navigate pop culture, music, or anything else.
Right. I mean, I think Constance Wu, who's on Fresh Off the Boat, had a really great quote recently about how, her show gets categorized as an Asian American show. We don't call Seinfeld and Friends a white sitcom. Like we might, but like larger society doesn't call.
That's not how it's billed. It's not how it's marketed.
Right. Exactly. It's just like Friends in New York City, where no other people of any other ethnicity live. It's just Friends. It's not like Asian Friends. But I feel like one of the things about Dr. Ken potentially is that it's a family sitcom with like the overwhelmed dad and like the rebellious teenage daughter, but they're all Asian American. Yeah. And here's the thing about representation too. Like, it's a shitty sitcom. Well, why can't Asian Americans make shitty sitcoms too? Do you know what I mean?
It was called All American Girl.
Right. Well, that's exactly the point. Like, but she wasn't allowed to make a shitty sitcom. When there's only like 3 of you and you have to represent. I mean, that's an unfair burden.
Yes, I feel that way in like our particular band too. That for better or worse, we represent Asian Americans.
Right.
And it's just a really odd thing to think that, well, why can't we just do our own music? And why are we always lumped in with the band from Japan or Jin the MC or you know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, I get it. We got some connections in some ways, but but one could argue that I have more of a connection with Robert Smith of The Cure, or Depeche Mode or New Order because of the style of music we play. Then we do have a connection with Shonen Knife as much as I love them. Because they're from Japan, like, and my parents happen to be from an island over. It's like, but musically speaking, we don't sing in Japanese. We don't sing in Chinese or Vietnamese or any other Asian language.
Oh wait, so you're not a Cantopop band?
Actually,
people ask that.
Come on, we're actually a K-pop band. Come on.
The idea of representation is a burden sometimes, but a necessary one. Like,
it is.
And we set ourselves up, right? And we even got called out on it. But when we put our books out, we called ourselves the Asian American Superhero Anthology.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, we kind of like took on that burden like head on, and then but why it's also a curse is that like, if you're going to set yourself up as a representation of Asian America, you better make damn sure that you represent all of Asian America, and that's where it gets tricky, right? Because
I mean, that's what happened with us. I mean, we were like, hey, we're an Asian American dance rock band, and then all of a sudden there was a certain level of responsibility with that, because then people would look at us a certain way, they make certain assumptions. It's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when we first started this thing, it was not to be social, political, or anything. It was just representation. But then we'd have these kids write these emails and letters saying like, "Thank you for existing. I didn't know this was possible. I didn't know I could be a musician." And it was like, wow, like maybe I got a certain level of responsibility here. Maybe I got to be accountable. Maybe we got to make sure that we really can address issues of because from the moment we decided to call ourselves an Asian band, or from the moment that people realized we were predominantly Asian, and they started labeling us this thing, it was like our activism was already embedded in, whether we wanted it or not, whether we was like this was our intention or not. All of a sudden, we were the band that was kicking down stereotypes. We were the band that was like trying to perform what people thought of as British music or white music.
Right.
And all of a sudden, is that Asian American spin on it.
Yeah. I think the important thing out of all of this is the idea that there's no such thing as raceless. Right? Do you know what I mean? I think that's the real kind of takeaway, is that whiteness isn't racelessness, it's whiteness. And if we can call that out and just shine a light on that, then I think, I think that opens it up for everybody else, right? I mean, it's because that goes back to the Constance Wu point, is that like, either call my sitcom a sitcom, or call whatever the sitcom, the other show, a white sitcom that talks about whiteness, because that's what it's doing. Friends isn't talking about just like, a neutral kind of like everyday experience. I mean, it kind of is, but it's the everyday experience of like
the
5
group.
White people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or 6, however many. I don't watch Friends.
Who somehow can afford to go to the coffee shop and hang out all day long.
And have like gigantic apartments in Manhattan. Right, exactly. So that's a very specific experience. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, right? No one's saying less shows about white people. Well, actually, I am saying that less shows about white people. But at least the shows that are about white people, that we should just call out that they're about white people, and that like shows about Asian people can be shows about Asian. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, there is no racelessness. Like, race informs our lives.
Which is a fascinating idea, especially when you think about how like race itself is kind of this social construct, but it's built and it's so complex and as you say, embedded into all of our views that. How do we get away from it, or do we want to get away from it at this particular point? Because it's so ingrained in society. How can we make it a more meaningful and constructive part of our lives to work with other people?
I used to think about this all the time. I mean, I still do think about this all the time. Like, what makes something Asian American? Is it the fact that an Asian American does something is what makes it Asian American? I mean, because we have common experiences as Asian Americans, even though we are a disparate group of people. We can point to some of those commonalities, and whether it's how like our experience vis-a-vis white people or other people, non-Asian people, or if it's our experiences, because that's where like perpetual foreigner stereotypes come from. It's like, we don't think of ourselves as perpetual foreigners. I don't look at like my Asian family or cousins as like, wow, you're really foreign. It's like that perception comes from like walking down the halls of a predominantly white school and people like asking you to speak Chinese or whatever. That's where that. So like our common experiences are we defining ourselves by how we are perceived by others? Are we defining ourselves by our own experiences? And then how do we define the work that we do, the art that we do? I was on a panel with the poet Lee Young Lee, and he says, if I write a poem about this cup of water on the table, is it inherently an Asian American poem? Or is it a poem about a cup of water? And my argument was like, it's an Asian American poem about a cup of water.
Yeah.
Because your experience as an Asian American is informed, whatever, even if, you don't have to talk about my immigrant family looks at these cup of water this way. And I think that's the thing too, like, we limit ourselves to certain tropes, and that's what makes something Asian American. And I feel like you said, if your band is playing like, European style kind of like dance rock, it's but it's informed by you being Asian American, because your experience is growing up. You listen to you asked what kind of music did I listen to growing up? Like, I didn't listen to Asian American music because I didn't know it existed.
Probably didn't exist.
It probably didn't exist in the like 80s and 90s. For me, like, what did I cling to? I cling to like I listened to a lot of The Cure. I listened to a lot of like hip hop. I listened to like Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Like, but I think I still came to it from a perspective of being Asian American, because the things that I identified with in that music, in those songs, were things that spoke to me, and what spoke to me is probably informed by who I am, and who I am is informed by my identity as a person of color, as an Asian American person, as a Chinese American person, as a Southern person. I grew up in the South. Like all of these facets are who I am, and none is necessarily more prominent than others.
Right, here's something to consider. How long does one stay Asian American? Because you think about like white didn't exist. That was a construct as a reaction to post-Civil War when they're trying to. It was a deliberate move for power, for collecting groups before that. You're German, you're Italian, and so on. Well, not necessarily Italian or Polish, but
but they've eventually become white.
Eventually, yeah, and they've lost that. So when people talk about Italian American culture, it's not usually seen as Italian American culture, or like Friends,
right,
or if in a say someone who's white, no one's ever like white, they're like this mix, right? I'm like 30% German, I got a couple Irish, I got a little sweet. So if they write about a cup of water, is it all of a sudden a white person's poem about a cup of water? Or is it a poem about a cup of water? It goes back to your idea of like, is it neutral?
Right, well, yeah, no, that's fascinating.
And when can an Asian American make it neutral?
Well, that's where it gets tricky too, because then it's like, is it neutral or is it whiteness? Right, because that's the question. Is that
but
because
that's our society, it's neutral.
Right, but that that comes back to like assimilation, right? Like, do we even want to be neutral? Is being neutral equating to being white? And are we saying, or is our argument when we say we don't want, I want to be able to listen to like whatever music I want to listen to? Is that me saying I want to be white, or is that me saying like I just like goth music, man? Just leave me alone, right? Like that's the question that we're all trying to figure out.
I think that's this conundrum of identity, and at that point, if Asian Americans become white, have we appropriated white culture? Or have we been kind of dissolved into it?
Well, that's the thing, right? And the other question is whiteness a culture in and of itself, like you were saying, or is it just